There's a website that contains every book ever written, as well as every book that ever will be written. It contains a full transcript of everything you've ever said in your life and everything you will say in the future. It can tell you exactly when and how you're going to die. It contains the secrets to human immortality, instructions on how to build faster-than-light travel, and the cure for every disease. There's a similar website for images. It contains photos of everything that has ever happened and will ever happen from every point of view in the universe. Both of these websites are real-world implementations of a short story by Jorge Luis Borges called The Library of Babel. So let's talk about that story, which is really more of a thought experiment. The universe, which others call the library, is composed of an indefinite, perhaps infinite number of hexagonal galleries. At the center of each hexagon is a ventilation shaft. Each hexagon has 5 bookshelves on 4 of the walls. The other sides open into hallways which lead to other identical hexagons. To the left and right of each hallway, there's a bedroom and bathroom. Also in each hallway is a spiral staircase which goes up and down forever. This pattern is repeated infinitely. Or is it? It's an open subject of debate whether or not the library is actually infinite, and our narrator has a theory about this which he reveals at the end. Each hexagon has 20 bookshelves. Each bookshelf has 32 books. Each book has 410 pages. Each page has 40 lines. Each line has 80 letters. The people in this story exist in their universe without any explanation, just like us, and they've been trying to figure it out for a while. What exactly are these books supposed to be? The books all seem to contain random nonsense. One book only has the letters MCV repeated from beginning to end. Another book is random gibberish except for the phrase, "O time thy pyramids." For every meaningful line, there are mountains of nonsense. For a while, they believed that the books they couldn't understand were written in ancient or distant languages. Language evolves over time, and the language they currently speak is very different from the ancient language. There are lots of languages spoken in the library. If you walk 90 floors up, you won't understand anything. But can 410 pages of a repeated sequence like MCV be meaningful in any language? 500 years ago, someone discovered a book of mostly gibberish, but with 2 pages of repeated lines. He showed this to other librarians, and everyone tried to figure out the language. He showed his find to a traveling decipherer who told him that the lines were written in Portuguese. Others said it was Yiddish. Within the century, experts had determined what the language actually was, a Samoyed Lithuanian dialect of Guarani with inflections from classical Arabic. The book turned out to be an explanation of combinatorics with the repeating variations as examples. This discovery led one smart librarian to figure out the truth of the library. All books had 25 identical elements, 22 letters of the alphabet, the space, the period, and the comma. The books contained all possible combinations of these 25 characters. In other words, the library contained everything that was able to be expressed in every language. The detailed history of the future, the autobiographies of the archangels, the faithful catalog of the library, thousands and thousands of false catalogs, the proof of the falsity of those false catalogs, a proof of the falsity of the true catalog, the Gnostic Gospel of Basilides, the commentary upon that gospel, the commentary on that gospel, the true story of your death, the translation of every book into every language, the interpolation of every book into all books. The first reaction to this discovery that the library contained everything was joy. Everyone was excited to know that for every conceivable problem, there was a book somewhere in the library with the solution. The universe all made sense now. People began to look for a special type of book called vindications, books that justify every action that you've ever taken and will ever take, and explain why your actions were necessary and meaningful. Wouldn't we all love to find a book like that? People got obsessed with finding finding their own vindications. They abandoned their native hexagons, fought each other, threw books down the ventilation shafts in anger, killed each other, and went insane. The vindications actually do exist. The narrator has seen 2 of them, which refer to people in the future. The problem is that the chance of finding your own vindication, or even a false version of your vindication, is basically 0. There were also official searchers, called inquisitors, who went around looking for books that contained solutions to the fundamental mysteries of mankind, like the origin of the library, but they didn't accomplish very much. Soon the hope and joy turned into despair. It's extremely depressing to know that the book you want 100% exists on some bookshelf in some hexagon of the library, but to also know that you have almost no chance of finding it. There was one blasphemous group that believed they should stop searching for books and instead shuffle all the characters manually until they created valuable books by pure chance. But the authorities cracked down on these heretics. Another group, called the Purifiers, believed the first thing to do was eliminate all worthless books, so they would go to hexagons and destroy all the books that had no meaning. Millions of books were lost this way, and everyone hates this group now. But is it really that big of a deal? Not really, because the library is so large that even if humans spent all their lives destroying books, it would make almost no difference. And since the library has every book, if you throw one book away, there exists numerous books that are exactly the same as that book except for one character being different. Some people believed in a legendary librarian called the Bookman. Somewhere in the library, there exists a book that is the perfect compendium of all other books, and some librarian must have examined that book. That librarian is the Bookman, and he is basically a god. Some people worship the Bookman, and many have gone in search of him and his book. One proposed method for finding the sacred hexagon of the Bookman is by regression. To find book A, first read book B, which tells you where to find book A. To find book B, first read book C, which tells you where to find book B. If you can find the starting point of this chain, you'll eventually make it. This is how the narrator has spent his life. There's a group of so-called infidels who believe the library is fundamentally meaningless. They're skeptics. They believe the library contains books that affirm everything, deny everything, confuse everything, and overall make no sense. The rule of the library is nonsense, and rationality is the exception. Trying to find meaning in books is like palm reading. Books in themselves have no inherent meaning. It's just a coincidence that they sometimes resemble real language. But the narrator disagrees with these people. He asserts that the library contains not a single piece of nonsense. Any possible text can be read in some cryptographic or allegorical way that makes it meaningful. For any text, there exists a book that explains how to read that text in a meaningful way. There is no combination of characters one can make that the divine library has not foreseen, and that in one or more of its secret tongues does not hide a terrible significance. There is no syllable one can speak that is not filled with tenderness and terror, that is not, in one of those languages, the mighty name of a god. To speak is to commit tautologies. In the narrator's present day, humanity is in decline. There's an overwhelming sense of nihilism. Everyone feels like their life is pointless because everything has already been written. In some places, the young people are illiterate and they bow down before the books and worship them as holy objects. Epidemics and violence have reduced the population, and there are also a lot of people who are giving up on life and throwing themselves down ventilation shafts. More and more people are doing that each year. Humans are on the verge of extinction. Finally, the narrator gives their theory about the library's size. We know that the number of possible books is not infinite, but the narrator believes that the library is infinite because it's periodic, like a fractal. If an eternal traveler should journey in any direction, he would find, after untold centuries, the same volumes are repeated in the same disorder, which, repeated, becomes order, the order. My solitude is shared by that elegant hope. Borges was actually working at a library when he wrote this story, and in case you couldn't tell, he really hated working at that library. I stuck out the library for about 9 years. They were 9 years of solid unhappiness. Sometimes in the evening, as I walked the 10 blocks to the tram line, my eyes would be filled with tears. It was a toxic, low-paying job with horrible coworkers. The one advantage was that there was almost no work to do, so he had a ton of time to write. The Library of Babel is a horrible and hopeless place to be. The librarians have all given up on life, and humanity is on the verge of extinction. This is meant to be a parody of the library he worked at. My Kafkian story, The Library of Babel, was meant as a nightmare version or magnification of that municipal library, and certain details in the text have no particular meaning. The number of books and shelves that I recorded in the story were literally what I had at my elbow. Clever critics have worried over these ciphers and generously endowed them with mystic significance. Don't you love it when the author himself says, "It's not that deep, bro"? So what does a normal, well-adjusted person do after reading a story about the worst possible library that could exist and how meaningless and depressing it would be? You build it in real life. The Library of Babel website was made by Jonathan Basile in 2015. It contains every possible page of 3,200 characters, leading to a total of 10 to the 4,677 pages. For comparison, the universe contains 10 to the 80 atoms. If you're wondering how it works, it uses some fancy math functions so that each unique location in the library will always generate the same text. It doesn't actually have these pages pre-generated and stored, because that would take more storage space than exists in the universe. This was followed up by an image version of the library, which contains every image of size 416 by 640 pixels. Each pixel can be any of 4,096 colors, leading to a total of 10 to the 961,755 images. Both websites have a search feature where you can find the location of something in the library. I recommend trying this out because no matter how much I explain it, there's a special feeling you can only get by doing it yourself. It's hard to replicate the feeling of surprise followed by depression when you realize that any image you have and everything you've ever written can be found somewhere on the website. If you browse the library randomly, you will most likely find complete nonsense, but I also recommend doing this because it'll make you realize how pointless it is to search for your own vindication or the true catalog of the library or any of those valuable books that the librarians tried to find. And just like in the story where there were various cults trying to decipher meaning and search for important books, there's a whole community of people who search these websites looking for some shred of meaning. It's kind of like treasure hunting, though more like gambling. But you might as well give it a try. You never know. Maybe you'll be the one to find the cure for cancer. The Library of Babel makes me think about the sea of content that the internet has enabled. There are 34 million videos posted to TikTok every day. There are 518,400 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every day. There's so much content in the world that if we spent all our lives doing nothing but consuming content, we could only ever see a tiny fraction of what exists. The Library of Babel is like social media without the algorithm. Can you imagine browsing TikTok or YouTube with no algorithm? Most of the videos are probably low quality, nonsensical, in a language you don't understand, or just plain boring. It's mostly random noise. So as much as people complain about algorithms, it's a lot better than the alternative where you can only browse randomly. On YouTube, it sometimes feels like every video has already been made. What's the point of adding to that sea of content? What's the point of being a creator in this day and age? Whether or not I upload this video today, 518,400 hours of video will be added to YouTube, making my video shrink into insignificance. There was a time in the early days of YouTube where nothing had been done yet. The first history channels and the first gaming channels were doing something original and new. But 20 years later, looking at YouTube, it feels like everything's already been done. But everyone has a unique perspective, because this exact moment has never happened before. You have never happened before. The collective mind of humanity is the Library of Babel, containing all possible art that could be made. If we don't bring our little piece of infinity to life by writing that essay or novel or making that video or art, then like the purifiers in the Library of Babel who purged books, we purged the hexagons containing all the art we could have added to the world. In the Library of Babel's case, the purged work doesn't matter, because there are a bunch of copies of those books with just one character replaced, but there's no copy of you. The kind of life you live, your experiences, and your perception of those experiences all make an extremely unique combination that we can't find in any other hexagon of the Library of Humanity, and if you don't share your unique perspective, then it will be lost to history. So share your art, whatever it is, because the world actually does need it. Because while there is a big sea of content, a sea is made of droplets, and each droplet makes the sea what it is. And when someone sails that sea, your little droplet might be the last thing they need to push their ship to the shores of meaning. The narrator of that story believed that every book, even the ones that looked like gibberish, had meaning in some language or in some code. Your art has meaning to someone. Even if you can't find the meaning in your work, someone else will find the meaning. So make it anyway.